All right, so we are in Genesis chapter 25. And just to touch on a few questions that we said we would research and get back to this week. First, one interesting note. Leslie, I see that you're on the Zoom, so thanks for bringing this to my attention. It's something I had not heard before, but there is a tradition among several traditions that Keturah is the Hebrew name for Hagar, which is her Egyptian name, so that Abraham, after the death of Sarah, married Hagar. Now, no necessarily any proof of this, but it's just one among many Judaic traditions of who Keturah might have been. So just interesting. We also asked last week, was there any way that the servant of Abraham, oh, whose book is this, James? I want to read it. Is it good?
Very good.
Yeah, good. We asked, is there any way for that servant to have known that Rebecca was a virgin just by her outward appearance, as the text suggests? And there will be later clothing ways that people show that they are a virgin. So there's references in scripture. This even relates to the story of Joseph, that he's wearing this coat of many colors that has sleeves like the kind of sleeves that the daughters of the king would wear or that the princesses would wear. So long sleeves on a garment would indicate that, but not until much later during the time of David is that actually a tradition. And so don't know how they got that. Nothing at this time seems to suggest that she would have been necessarily wearing anything, but perhaps just the role she was taking of leaving her family home, going to the well. That's not necessarily something that a husband would have allowed a wife at that time to do, put them in that state of vulnerability or put them to work like that. So perhaps her role more so than her clothing could have been an indication.
Okay, wait, slow down a second.
Yeah.
Go back.
Go back up. All right.
You're saying that it says that that Keturah is the Egyptian name for Hagar?
Keturah would be the Hebrew name for Hagar, which is her Egyptian name. That is, I'm not saying that's true, but that is a tradition.
Oh, okay. So that might be his, right? Or Ishmael? Is that, am I confusing the lady?
Exactly, that's who I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jay, go ahead and answer, or I just looked into the question about whether the descendants of Ishmael are named in the Quran like they are in Hebrew scriptures, and they're not. That comes from traditions, and I was trying to find out which ones. The earliest reference I could find was Hisham ibn al-Kalbi, who lived from 737 to 819 AD. He was the one that established a genealogical link between Ishmael and Muhammad using, this is from Wikipedia, writings in the ancient oral traditions of the Arabs. His book, Jamharat al-Nasab, the event of kinship, seems to posit that people known as Arabs of his time were all descendants of Ishmael. Most of them trace it to Kedar.
Okay.
The lineage,
Yeah.
Ishmael to Kedar to Adnan, and then eventually to Muhammad.
Okay, thanks, Ben. So Ben said he looked into whether or not the descendants of Ishmael are listed in the Quran as they are here in the Hebrew scriptures, and they're not. And so it's interesting that we have this long list, but the Islamic tradition traces it from Ishmael to Kedar and then onward. Thanks, Ben. All right, how about that? So we are going into the Jacob cycle. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, of Padan Aram, sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. All right, so we have two major Old Testament themes here that speak to the ways in which God's calling operates. That God's calling subverts the understanding of society, of what should be privileged, of what should be normal. And these two themes will be picked up again and again and again with major figures. The first is the idea of infertility, that out of seeming nothingness, dead ends, infertility, nothing will come from it. God somehow makes a way. So we'll see that with other figures like Hannah praying for a child, and she's given the prophet Samuel. And so this idea of some new life coming out of what was suspected to be barren is a major theme. The second is the laws of primogeniture. The firstborn is the one who's going to inherit, the one who's going to be privileged, the one who's going to be called. And so Esau is going to be the one born first. Esau is going to live into, similar to our own society, these conceptions of what a man looks like and acts like: a skillful hunter, hairy, ruddy, in shape. That's who Isaac loves. That's who you would think would be the one to carry on this blessing, this being the ancestor of the great nation. But Jacob, the one who lives in tents, is quiet, loved by his mother, Jacob's going to be the one called instead. So just subverting what people expect about the system. God isn't going to act in the ways that you expect. It's going to be in new ways, different ways, subversive ways. We have here, just like we did with Isaac and Ishmael, that the two sons represent two nations. So Esau is going to be the ancestor of the Edomites, and other Canaanite clans are going to claim Esau as their ancestor. And so these are going to be people in constant conflict with the Israelites. And so we have here that they have been warring with each other since the womb. So we're kind of reading back into the story. What is the origin of these people always being in conflict with each other? Well, their ancestors from the very womb have been in conflict with each other. And get this, we believe as Israelites, the younger shall be served by the older, the weaker by the stronger. All right, so Esau, the name means red or ruddy, so named after the color of his hair. Jacob, growing up as a kid, always had issue that you'd go to the store with all the bookmarks and it had the meaning of the name. And the supplanter, he who grasps the heel, is what Jacob means, but his name will be changed. Questions, comments?
Just thinking about some of like Bob's comments about, or other people too, about psychology.
Yeah.
We've had the father-son tension, and now here's sibling rivalry again.
Yeah. Oh, Bob, I'm sure you could say a lot about that. The whole concept of sibling rivalry is a major basis for thought. Rick, you're a therapist. We got a lot of therapists in here, actually.
I'm a sibling.
You're a sibling. You're a sibling. You know all about sibling rivalry. Absolutely.
That idea loves to find it, right? Like, there's only a certain amount. Somebody's going to get some more than others. It sort of has that flavor of it. I mean, which you can go Freudian on that if you want, but I think it's a misconception.
Saying the idea that love is finite and must be divided, is that what you said?
Yeah, there's only a certain amount.
Only a certain amount to go around,
Some
yeah.
siblings will get more than others.
Some siblings get more than others. Yeah, and scripture tries to fight against that concept of, is there a finite amount of love? But the experience of it can feel finite. Other questions or comments? Yeah, Toby?
Well, in reading it, to me, this is when Genesis actually starts to come alive.
Hmm.
And I don't know, the narrative pace of it really picks up. And it's the whole Jacob cycle. Now, I'm a brother. My brother died 20 years ago. It was
Sorry.
a fraught relationship. So Cain and Abel have always been significant to me. And now you're really getting into the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
I don't see it necessarily in religious, I see it in family dynamics and stuff like that. And with Joseph and his brothers, you're gonna have the extension of that.
Yeah.
And then you've got the mother. Rebecca is a very complicated character in this, favoring the one son. And in the King James, I just can't get past Esau as a hairy man. I am a smooth man.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that seems to me to set the stage for everything.
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
I think this is exciting.
Yeah, thanks. Toby says the narrative's just kind of picking up. We had our primeval history, then we spent 10 chapters waiting for Isaac to come onto the scene. Okay, now the action starts. The sibling rivalry, the conflict with the parents. Which one's the parents' favorite? We're going to get that again with Jacob showing favoritism to Joseph and to Benjamin versus the other brothers. That's going to cause conflict in the family. The family drama is real. And Toby's saying just can't get over the King James saying Esau is a hairy man, I am a smooth man. How we pick up on those physical differences to create division between people, to create differences. Well, we're not the same. Just by hairiness. Yeah. And the way in which in our parlance, smooth is something cool, debonair. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, two things. First of all, she knows, she's told by God that who's going to be the favored one, the more successful one. And we know that she plays into that, and that kind of
interesting.
that's coming. But the other thing is, there's no evidence then that she told her husband this. You know, I mean, how it would be in the scriptures again, whether it was told just through women or whatever, it's confusing. But the idea that when you are told something by God, do you share it? And when would you share it? And if you get the feeling like if she did share it, her husband was counter to that. Because they were looking for the blessing of God. And didn't pursue that.
Yeah, great observation. Shirley's saying Rebecca was told which one was going to be the privileged one. So she's heard this from God. Of course, she's going to favor Jacob because Jacob has already been established as the one who's going to be served. And did she tell Isaac? And so Shirley says this raises the question. If you receive a message from God, who do you tell? How do you tell? Did she tell Isaac? And if she did tell Isaac, he doesn't seem to be going along with that by favoring Esau or hoping that God will change God's mind. Maybe Rebecca didn't hear right. It was supposed to be Esau, and God's going to come through. Yeah. How do we, if someone tells us they've heard the voice of God, how do we believe it when we think that something else is probably more likely?
Especially when it's so counter to, you know, that it just was so natural to them, the firstborn was the one.
Yeah, especially because in that culture, Shirley's saying the firstborn was the one. And here we'll get it again. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff." So we're playing with words here. Esau, the red one, being tempted by the red stuff. "For I am famished." Therefore he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Okay, really interesting scene. How do we assign positive or negative moral action to this text? Is Jacob deceitful? Is Jacob cunning? Is Esau hasteful? Is Esau being taken advantage of? Very complicated. You can't necessarily say that one character is doing the right thing and the other one's doing the wrong thing. So Esau comes in from the fields. He wants to eat. Jacob takes advantage of this moment to get him to sell his birthright. Esau's so famished, he thinks that his birthright is worthless to him. So he sells it for bread and lentil stew. He didn't really get much out of this deal. One meal. And how could he have been so famished? He eats the stew. He's good enough to just go on his way. That's it. But Esau despises his birthright because it's no longer his. He has sold it. Brings up the question, to what degree is this verbal contract binding? Esau seems to think that it is. Did Jacob and Esau tell Isaac? Did they codify it in some way? Did they have a ritual? We're not told, but Esau seems to think it's binding. Thoughts on this story? Yeah,
So
Toby?
what is the difference between this birthright and the blessing that Isaac will give, or wants to give to Esau, but Jacob steals?
Yeah, great question. So the blessing and birthright are different. The birthright being in inheritance, so the land, finances. The blessing was more of a spiritual component, that the firstborn received the primary words from the father upon the father's deathbed. The blessing would be that you may conquer all your enemies, that you may have everything that you need. And so it was more of a spiritual component. The other children would also receive a blessing, but it would be more like, may you enjoy serving your older brother. That's your blessing, something like that.
So Jacob really is a bad guy. I mean, he takes everything from us.
Is that bad? Yeah. Other thoughts? All right, you're right, Toby. This is getting more exciting. Kevin?
I wonder about the forces that were despised. Like, what exactly do you mean there? Does it mean he treated it like it was worthless? Does it mean that now that he's lost it?
Great question.
Yeah, it's a strange.
It is, isn't it? Okay. So the question for online folks, the word despised seems like a strange word. What does it mean? Okay, so we need to, it's got extra endings on it, so we need to get to the root word. Okay, so it's more like a mocking, a despise. So based on the way it's being used in other contexts, makes me think that, all right, Jacob, you think you have the birthright. What good is it? It's worthless. I'm still the older brother. You can have the birthright, but you're still a nobody. That's the sense I'm getting.
It's the translation that's used. This is what translation is this?
This is New Revised Standard Version.
And the King James uses the same word.
It uses despise as well. All right. Does anyone remember Abimelech?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the king that Isaac's father Abraham had a few run-ins with. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. So same situation, different time. Isaac went to Gerar to King Abimelech of the Philistines. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Settle in the land that I shall show you. Reside in this land as an alien, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will fulfill the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands, and all the nations of the earth shall gain blessing for themselves through your offspring, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So Isaac settled in Gerar. One of the men of the place asked him about his wife. He said, "She is my sister," for he was afraid to say my wife, thinking, or else the men of the place might kill me for the sake of Rebekah, because she is attractive in appearance. When Isaac had been there a long time, King Abimelech of the Philistines looked out of a window and saw him fondling his wife Rebekah. So Abimelech called for Isaac and said, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say, 'She is my sister'?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought I might die because of her." Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall be put to death." Isaac sowed seed in that land, and in the same year reaped 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich. He prospered more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and a great household, so that the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped up and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you have become too powerful for us." All right, let's pause because we've got a lot to talk about. All right, so Isaac is told not to go down to the land of Egypt, but to stay in the land of the Philistines. We're not ready to go to Egypt yet. Egypt is, of course, going to play a large role in the history of Israel, but they're trying to establish, again, kind of this history of rights to the land of the Philistines that they'll conquer when they come back to the area. So we've talked a lot about this, of kind of laying the groundwork for why they deserve the land. Not only did Abraham live there and establish himself there, but also Isaac has now come into the same territory as his father. So it has passed from one generation to the next, which is the way in which you make a claim on a land. If you not just own it, but then can pass that land to your next of kin, well, then you've established inheritance for the land. And so here we are establishing inheritance. Isaac is coming into the same space. He's coming into this space as an alien. They're going to be reminded later when they come out of Egypt. Remember, you were an alien in the land, not just in Egypt. You were an alien from the time of Abraham. It's interesting that the promise, Isaac receives the promise as well. But the promise is once again established through the faith of Abraham. So Abraham's faith is now carrying on the promise to the next generation. After his death, the faith that he showed in life is still playing a role in how the blessing or the promise is carried out. We have the same scene. Isaac is doing the same actions. So again, we can bring the psychology into it of the sins of our fathers. Isaac has the same fears. What do you all make of the fact that we're retelling the same story but with different names? What's going on? Why put it in the Bible? No right answers here. So your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, Barbara?
It reestablishes and repeats the right of these people to the land.
So kind of, yeah, exactly. Reestablishing that they have right to the land. That's why you would repeat it. Yeah, other thoughts on why we're pretending Rebecca's his sister again?
The theory that the original version or earlier version of the binding of Isaac actually ends with his sacrifice points to this repetition as being kind of, indicative that, Isaac didn't really survive it. It's just repeating the same thing.
Oh, interesting. So Ben was referring again to the tradition that Isaac didn't come back from the sacrifice. And so Isaac doesn't really have his own story. They're just repeating the stories of Abraham with Isaac's name in it.
He does seem like kind of a non-entity.
Isaac seems like a non-entity. I think Robin or Chris, someone mentioned that last week, that not a lot of agency from Isaac.
And then the blessing stuff almost starts to become like, "Hi, how are you?" Is that called phatic communion? Where you just, it's these formulas for interaction where you don't really want to know how the other person feels, et cetera, et cetera. It's just formula.
Okay. Toby's saying the promise is starting to feel a little formulaic. Hi, Isaac, how are you? By the way, you'll be the ancestor of many nations. They'll number the stars like the heavens. God's repeating God's self a lot. We definitely have this interplay of faith and doubt. Isaac has just received the promise, and like Abraham, We get a story where he's doubting God's protection and providence coming right afterwards. Yeah, go ahead, Diana.
It also repeats the idea that they would be blessed to be a blessing.
Mm,
I think that's in
yeah.
Hebrews.
Yes, it does. So Diane's saying it repeats the notion of blessed to be a blessing. And then here they are going into a foreign land and practicing deception. I just told you you're going to be the father of many nations. Here you are living in fear. I just told you you're blessed to bless the nations, and here you are taking advantage of the nations. I feel sorry for Abimelech here. The man's just trying to do the right thing, constantly being deceived.
Do we ever find out his age?
Isaac's age?
Yeah, Abimelech's age.
Abimelech, how old is? No, I
'Cause he
no
appears
idea.
later, too.
There'll be other kings, yeah, called Abimelech.
One thing that sticks out with this story, wherever we hear it, is that this other leader is believing that even inadvertently, were you to take this person away from someone, you receive guilt. So they have some interesting moral code, and
Yeah.
they're very respectful of some sort of marriage relationship, which maybe seems a little surprising.
Yeah, Shirley's saying kind of surprising that the Philistine folks have some sort of moral code, or even laying with someone else's spouse by accident would bring guilt upon the people. Yeah, that is really interesting that they already have a do not covet type law. Yeah, pre-10 commandments. I mean, it is interesting that one of the people might easily have lain with your wife. So we're getting a sense of, okay, you don't sleep with someone else's spouse, but the woman doesn't necessarily have a lot of agency that someone could easily lie with her. I think it's also suggesting a little bit of fear of Yahweh, that Abimelech still remembers that this God of Abraham and Isaac is someone to be feared. So Isaac becomes rich. The Philistines envy him. This is going to be the same situation with the Israelites in Egypt, that the Egypts are going to be envious of the wealth of the Israelites. And so they suggest that they need to enslave them lest they get too large and prosperous. It claims that the Philistines had tried to stop up the wells dug by Abraham, which is their claim to the land. But Isaac is going to leave. Yeah, Shirley?
One more thing, I always think when you go with the story of Joseph, this whole idea of putting aside food, it makes it sound as though that was some new idea on Joseph's part. But here we see that Egypt is the place you go when you have famine. They always have the extra.
Shirley is saying in the story of Joseph, it's going to seem as if Joseph has this new idea to store up food for the famine. But it also seems like throughout history, Egypt is where you go to access food. Yeah. Just trying to think of today's context of where do asylum seekers go to find safety? In this time, it's Egypt, is the nation that has the concentration of wealth, for sure. So Isaac departed from there and camped in the Wadi Gerar and settled there. Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herders of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herders, saying, "This water is ours." So he called the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also. So he called it Sitnah. He moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called it Rehoboth, saying, "Now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." From there he went up to Beersheba, and that very night the Lord appeared to him and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you and make your offspring numerous for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there, called on the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Ahuzath his advisor and Phicol the commander of his army. And Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you?" They said, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we say, let there be an oath between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, so that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you, and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now blessed of the Lord." So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths, and Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. That same day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." He called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. Again. All right. So, where were we? 17. So Isaac departs from the land of the Philistines. He's trying to redig the wells of Abraham so that he can lay claim to them once again. This is very natural. There are herding nomadic communities trying to lay claim to wells. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the way in which you protected your wells would be you covered them up. You did not have a map of where the wells were. You kept the map in your head. Knowledge of water in the desert, the Judean wilderness, was so vital. And so, of course, they're going to quarrel over water sources. So they're having this experience where they're trying to find something of their own. They dig a well, they fight over it. Finally, there's one that's not being quarreled over. And so they say, okay, God is providing for us. Finally, we have water, we have life. We can be fruitful in this land. Some of the language that we had is language that will be used throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament. So the Lord appears to Isaac in Beersheba. I say that the B can be a V. That's why I was pronouncing it that way in Hebrew. So Beersheba. God appears to him, and then the response, this is going to be the same thing with Jacob. The response is to build an altar. So you build an altar as a way to say, this is where I have experienced the divine. So that when someone else comes and sees the altar that has been built, then you know that an experience with the divine has happened here. So building an altar, calling on the name of the Lord, speaking the name Yahweh, saying that name has spiritual power in their mind. So when you speak the name of a God, you're calling upon it, you're speaking its power, its life. And then he pitches a tent here. So this is the concept of tabernacling. And so when they are carrying the presence of God with them throughout the Old Testament, they believe that God resides in the tabernacle. And when they pitch the tent, that is where God will reside within that tabernacle. And then in John chapter 1, when there's this great theological prologue, it says God came and lived among them, but the word used is tabernacle. God came and pitched God's tent among the people. God tabernacled among the people. So God is living with them. We're going to get really interesting dialogue when it comes time to build the temple. Okay, we've had this tent that we carry with us. God moves with us, but now that we're in the land, wouldn't it be nice if we had a permanent place where God could reside? And so Solomon and David, they want to build this temple, but then God says, I don't reside in one place. I'm a God on the move. And so you're not going to build the temple, David. Solomon can build the temple, but that's not going to be my only home. I'm a God that is on the move, that pitches a tent in the midst of the people wherever they go. So this is really important language here. And just thinking of altars and stones, the Hebrew word for stone being Evan, and then Ebenezer, my blessed Ebenezer, if you heard that word. Yeah, a helping stone, the stone that you would use in an altar. Okay, one last verse. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. All right, conflict between the in-laws. We get it all. Every single family relationship that you can imagine not going well. Well, here Isaac and Rebekah do not like their in-laws, their daughters-in-law. All right, so I mentioned Esau being the ancestor of the Edomites. Here he is being connected to the Hittites. So all of these Canaanite tribes that are not Israel being connected to Esau instead. Questions or comments? Yeah, Ben?
Before we go too much further, I wanted to jump back to Ishmael because last week I think Toby asked, do we see Ishmael again? And not really, right? He comes back to the funeral with his descendants, and that's pretty much it. Until the book of Galatians, there's that allegory of the Sarah and Hagar and the Jews and Gentiles, basically, and I wonder if you would comment on that.
Yeah. So Ben's question is, okay, we don't really see Ishmael again until we get this reference in the book of Galatians that's trying to say, the distinction of the promise of Hagar versus Sarah, of Isaac versus Ishmael. Let me formulate some thoughts on that, Ben, and we'll talk about it next week. Yeah, great question. Other thoughts? All right. Got 3 minutes. Let's forge ahead. So fun, so dramatic. All right. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called his elder son Esau and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." He said, "See, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. Isaac loves game, remember? Then prepare for me savory food, such as I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may bless you before I die. It's time for the blessing." Now, Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game for his father, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me game and prepare for me savory food to eat, that I may bless you before the Lord before I die.' Now, therefore, my son, obey my word as I command you. Go to the flock and get me 2 choice kids, so that I may prepare for them savory food for your father, such as he likes. And you shall take it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." But Jacob said to his mother Rebekah, "Look, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a man of smooth skin." All right, that's a fun place to stop. So you've got to come back next week and get the rest of the story. What's going to happen?
It's great.
Esau is sent out to the hunt. Now, Jacob is known as the deceiver, but we talked about last week we get so very little of the women in the story, but when we do get their names, when we do get the story, they're always acting, they're always working, they're always thinking, they're doing the work, even though we don't get their stories. And so Rebekah's getting involved here. She's been told that Jacob is the one God has chosen. And it's interesting that for God's call to happen, Rebekah's got to get to work and take matters into her own hands. So let's talk about that next week too. All right, let me close this with a word of prayer. Oh, we got one comment in the chat. Oh, good morning. God, thank you as always for this chance to look into your scriptures. As we see the story of these ancestors, we see the story of ourselves. We see all of our conflict, all of our family drama, all of the ways in which it is hard to be in relationship with other humans. And so we pray for your wisdom and guidance always to create harmony and community where we can, with who we can. And we pray that we may be people who feel blessed to be blessing to others. In Christ's name, amen. All right, thanks everyone. See you in worship.